Good morning and welcome to another episode of Respections. Today we are at the Lewis Latimer Houses and we are going to be treated to a very fascinating experience here. Lewis Latimer was a famous inventor of color and he did many things. He lived in the Flushing area of Queens, and today we are going to be treated to this episode by two young and dynamic individuals. So they'll introduce themselves. So stay tuned and enjoy.
So I am the education manager here at the Lewis Latimer House Museum, which means I'm in charge of all the educational programming. That means our field trips, our school programs, our residencies, our on-site programs for families, and our outreach programs for families. I kind of oversee all of those programs and really think of ways to connect us to the community. It's work that I've been doing for a long time. So when I was in middle school, my mother started an after-school program and summer camp program in Charlotte, North Carolina. That was for students in the community, for students attending Title I schools, or students whose families were below the poverty line. It was a welcoming space that kind of focused on arts and education. Both during the summer camp program and the after-school program. I attended the program, eventually taught through the program, and really developed a love of education, working with the community, a love of trying to find ways to infuse the arts into community programming as well. And just a spark and a love of connecting with others. And that's one of the main things I love about working at the museum. I think that's the beauty of museums, is that we tell stories. And stories are incredibly relatable. I think Latimer's story is incredibly relatable. We are in Flushing, Queens. We are in the center, in the middle of a neighborhood. There is the Latimer Gardens housing complex right across the street. We're surrounded by apartment buildings. So some of the things that I love is just that people are walking by and come in and are curious. This house has been here for many, many years, but they've never been here before. They don't know about Latimer's story, but they know about this house. We've also had students who are like, oh yeah, I know this house in my neighborhood. I've been here before. I think it's a beautiful example of hyper-local, super local, important Black history in Flushing and in Queens. So that's what we do is we focus on Latimer's story, his legacy, his impact, but also his family, also the community around him that he was a part of, that he worked to support. And we do that through all kinds of programming. So again, our family programs, our field trips. We also do work to highlight other really significant Black historical sites in New York. So we have virtual programs that get to kind of highlight these stories. And we'll be restarting our monthly family programs as well on Saturdays too. We do have a big birthday celebration coming up on Saturday, September 14th, so we're very, very excited about that. We are open on the weekends, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday from 11 to 5. We are a free museum, though we do really appreciate donations as well. But otherwise, we offer free programming and free tours as well. So come in and join us, come learn about Latimer and his life, and come visit this beautiful house. And I will now cut that out. We are a very small but very, very mighty team of really dedicated professionals who are dedicated to sharing Latimer's story, including my colleague, Shane Coleman, who is our full-time STEAM educator.
Hello, my name is Shane Coleman. Thank you, Adriana, for introducing me. I am the full-time STEAM educator at the Lewis Latimer House Museum. A little bit about me. I'm originally from Massachusetts, where I grew up in Western Massachusetts. With a very, very small family, I studied astronomy and space science. And then I spent the last 10 years actually as a physics educator in the New York City Department of Education. So I came to work at this museum primarily because of my interests in science, that were not, I think, solitary. I think a big part of me being engaged in science throughout the course of my younger life was also remaining engaged with the other subjects and disciplines, the arts, music, mathematics, history, language. All of those things were a part of my childhood experience because my mom would drag me to museums when I was very young to encourage me to be a lifelong learner. So currently at the museum, what we focus on is really bringing the Latimer legacy to life in our STEAM education programming. I think it's already been mentioned that we offer a number of workshops, virtual and in-person experiences, as well as residencies at schools. And as a former educator and classroom teacher, I think my approach is really encouraging teachers, faculty, communities, parents, and students to utilize library and museum spaces for all types of out-of-school learning. I think that we really have a beautiful archive, owing to, of course, the work of Latimer's descendants that have helped us retain a lot of information about what it was like in the 18th, 19th century and 20th century to live as a person of color, to live as an African American. And as a Black person in the sciences, I do think that there is so much of a rich history here that shows young people and adults what it means to engage in multidisciplinary learning and activities. I think it's an important part of the component of our museum that we're updated. We have brand new renovations that really display this history of invention. But what I also love is that we talk about Latimer and his family. So we really try to incorporate as much as possible about the Latimer legacy and the work that we do in both our on-site and expansive programming in the community.
So this is one of my favorite rooms. I think I have two favorite rooms in particular. But this is our new entry space into the museum. This was the back of the museum previously. But we just reopened in June of this year. We work with a fantastic design company, Isometric, to design the exhibition, our new print exhibition. And I think it's just a really beautiful redesign. Each room previously had some objects, some furniture, panels talking about Latimer's story, but I love the redesign because it really kind of breaks down Latimer's world and his life into kind of themes for each of the rooms, and then you're able to take a really deep dive into just how incredible his own story is, but also that of his family and that of the community around him. The room that we're in right now, Connections Across Time, talks about how Latimer is still being remembered, recognized within the past few decades. So we have comics from 1976 that talk about Latimer's career. We have a screen that shows different clips, so Blackish, The L Word, and Steven Universe, that are talking about Latimer trying to ensure that kids and students are able to learn about really important figures like Lewis Latimer. We also have a pair of shoes from the Olympian Steph Curry, his Retro One sneakers that honor Lewis Latimer. He has featured one of Latimer's patent numbers on the shoe, and then there is also a light bulb on the tongue of the shoe as well. So we get to talk about how we aren't the only ones who are continuing to share his story, but his story is continuing to be told through media, through fashion, through other kinds of really kind of relevant media. Few things in this space as well. This is not the original location of the house, so when you do visit, we hope that you visit, you might notice that it doesn't necessarily match the surroundings, the surrounding buildings. The house was moved about 1.5 miles away from its original location in 1988. This is the original house. This is Lewis, his wife Mary, one of his daughters right here. But there is a massive community effort and a family effort to save Latimer's house, to save his story. Really in part thanks to Latimer's granddaughter, Dr. Winifred Norman, who we see throughout different spaces of the museum and different spaces and phases of her life. Dr. Norman is right up here. She's also right down here. She was a social worker working in Manhattan, and she was really instrumental into continuing Latimer's legacy. This house was up for demolition in the 80s, but she co-founded the Committee to Save the Latimer House. There was a community effort, including the borough president at the time, Claire Schulman, to save the house, to actually pick up the entire house, put it on a truck, a bed truck, and then move it to its location where it is right now. You'll be able to see a map in a little bit that my colleague Shane can show you of exactly where the house was previously, and then where we are now at Leavitt Street as well. One of the, I think, amazing things about working at this museum, working with Latimer's history and interest in the arts, and working with a very creative team, I think we are all creative in some way, are the ways that the arts are a feature, a highlight of the museum and of Latimer's story. I've always loved glass, glass blowing, stained glass, so it was incredible to learn about Latimer's supervision of light bulb factories in London, and then to kind of see his impact on electric lighting be reflected through this neon sign, this beautiful new neon sign that welcomes you when you come in the door. Really talking about how Latimer is lighting up the world. Another thing that I love about the redesign of the space is that you really get to kind of understand a little bit more about who Latimer was, his personality, and that's through his own writings, his own recounting of his own story. So you see drawings that he's done of himself. This is one that he's done in 1911. He is left, he's no longer working with Thomas Edison, and it's kind of a lighthearted moment where he is balancing on a ruler, trying to figure out where he's going to go next. He was often able to find work, but there were periods where he wasn't working. He was looking for work, which I think is something that is very relatable to, I think, everyone. So I think there are all these moments throughout the arts, throughout Latimer's technical skill, where we just get to learn more about his personality. There are also all of these quotes of Latimer recounting his own story and reminding us a lot of things. He says, "There is only one time now, there is only one day today. Yesterday is gone beyond recall, and we have no assurance that for us there will be a tomorrow." So he's encouraging us to seize the moment, seize the day, to do what we can to improve the lives of our communities and the lives of others around us as well.
Hate is loud. It gets clicks. It gets attention. Hate, however, is actually quite small. But love is the majority, filling up something far more important than any feed. Love fills our hearts, our lives, our every day, with understanding, empathy, and compassion, leaving hate to become what it truly is, a whisper.
Okay, so we are in, I think, my second favorite room of the house. This room is inspired by Latimer's family, the imagination, the perseverance that was a through line through through Lewis's parents, through Lewis and his wife, and through his daughters, and through his descendants as well. It's a warm room. You feel it through design, through the design of the space, through the colors of the space, and through the story that we're telling here. So we're highlighting the imagination of the family. We're also highlighting the creative spark. That was, again, another through line throughout the entire family. So my colleague Shane will talk about Latimer's, his family's history. So the incredible story of George Latimer and Rebecca Latimer, so Lewis's parents. But then we'll also be able to talk about the ways that Lewis was able to combine his love of the arts and of the sciences seamlessly throughout his life, and just kind of, again, more of his personality as a creative, as a person who loved words and images and language, whether that was creating these technical detailed drawings or whether it was actually creating poems and poetry honoring his family, his wife, and his community as well. So I'll turn to Shane.
So as mentioned before, sometimes our story starts before we're born. When Lewis Latimer was growing up in Massachusetts, he was the child of 4. And his mother and father, as we know from historical records, census data, and also the number of archival information that was kept by the family, were enslaved Virginians. George Latimer and Rebecca Latimer would flee from their respective plantations in Norfolk, Virginia. And when Rebecca Latimer was pregnant with their first child, they would escape all the way up to Massachusetts, where Lewis Latimer would be born. So we have an incredible exhibit here that displays historically what that would have looked like in terms of the trials and tribulations of escaping from slavery, some connections, of course, to abolition and the Underground Railroad, and primarily the story of George and Rebecca Latimer, who would navigate their way amidst racial tensions, anti-Black legislation, fugitive slave laws, and of course the Dred Scott decision, which would come in 1857. The number of things that we have collected here represent that George and Rebecca Latimer were at the center and oftentimes very key turn points in the history of abolition in the North. George Latimer would become arrested for petty crimes. And because of these trials, we know that the Latimer family would endure very severe poverty growing up and have a lot of challenges that were oftentimes rivaled by George and Rebecca's ingenuity. The imagination they had for a better world and their commitment to the abolitionary cause for other enslaved peoples would be something that would allow the North's continuing process of developing abolition to continue and, of course, to light the fires for abolitionary thought in many other places, as we know, in the world. We even have here some records of the arrest warrants for Rebecca and George. This environment growing up would have had a lot of impact on Lewis Latimer. We know that the father would work a number of jobs, the mother would work as a domestic. They would not have enough to get by, and eventually the children would have to enter into the workforce at very early ages. But this community that surrounded abolition at that time, including popular and notable historical figures such as Frederick Douglass, William Lloyd Garrison, were a big part of the reasons why George Latimer and Rebecca Latimer's story would continue to be told. And this, I think, and we often talk about very often, is an incredible inspiration to the beginnings of where Lewis Latimer's upbringing would bring him to continually inspiring his own imagination, his own love of the arts, his own love of communication. Growing up in a household that was kind of bent on preserving the legacy of its individuals and their own histories would have definitely led to a lot of the early sparks for ingenuity that we see in the soon-to-be Black inventor. We have records of this as well as some of the effects from the Latimer family and Lewis Latimer themselves. We have painting supplies, artistic implements, images and pictures and photographs that the family would keep. And we also have a number of letters of correspondence. Here is a beautiful picture that we also have of who Latimer would meet and marry. This is Mary Wilson, who was also born and raised in Massachusetts. And when they would get married at about the age of 26 or 27, their life would begin and kind of continue these two Black families meeting together in the abolitionary North, a kind of wonderful family that was built on this inspirational background. I believe in record, Mary Wilson's family was African American and Caribbean American, so we have a lot of incredible history in her family as well. But the artistic and linguistic qualities that Latimer had were definitely a part of this historical background. And here we even see that's the connections to the Underground Railroad. As we know, there were many different trails that the Underground Railroad would take, all leaving from the kind of centralized plantation economy of the South into different areas, both north and to the further south into Texas and Mexico. And this trajectory from Norfolk to Baltimore to Philadelphia and to Boston would be the trajectory that the Latimer family would take as the children were being born. And we also know that at some point, it actually returned back to Virginia to fight on the James River for the same type of abolitionary causes that his father and mother believed in. So as we know, in the history of enslavement and the history subsequently of abolition, there's an ongoing battle, both legislatively and socially, to continue the work of building liberationary movements. And for example, George Latimer's captivation, his incarceration after the point when he had escaped, definitely had a marker on Lewis Latimer's life. So we see here just really quickly a beautiful quote from Latimer in their own writing from their journal. Notably, Latimer would write in the third person, so even though it is stating his full name, he's writing about himself. Lewis Latimer was born in Chelsea, Massachusetts on the 4th of September, 1848. He was the youngest of a family of 3 boys and 1 girl. The older of the two, the children of 2 fugitive slaves from Virginia. I'll read it one more time. Lewis Howard Latimer was born in Chelsea, Massachusetts on the 4th of September, 1848. He was the youngest of a family of 3 boys and 1 girl, the children of 2 fugitive slaves from Virginia. So if you ever think about the stories that you hear from your parents, from your grandparents, from people in your family that are older than you, and you're often wondering, why am I listening to this? Here's that legacy. They have a story to tell you. And you can imagine the Latimer household, what it was like being raised in the story of fugitive slavery. But also to touch back on some more historical figures that have been a part of this. When George Latimer was incarcerated for petty crime, he was, of course, given a very, very large bail, a bail that no ordinary civilian or American citizen would be able to afford. But it was because of the community of abolition around him, and also because of the work of, again, notable figures like Frederick Douglass, who would defend a lot of these cases in court, that we would see that not only was George Latimer freed from incarceration because they were able to post his bail, but there were also a number of meetings that were organized that would establish new policies and laws that when enslaved people or former fugitive enslaved people were arrested, their trial or their court case was allowed some more litigation and some more boundaries around that litigation so that they couldn't be quickly removed from their families, quickly removed and put in detention. And this law would actually ban, it came to be known as a part of the 1843 Liberty Act in Massachusetts. This law would ban the detention of fugitive enslaved people, which was key in securing their liberation afterwards.
My 15-year-old son, Ethan, and I had a fun and relaxing morning. We returned home, and Ethan walked to his best friend's house an hour later. I heard the ambulance scream by the street, carrying my beautiful boy. Ethan was shot in the head in his best friend's house with an unsecured gun. He had 0 chance of survival. The father, the gun owner, he stored his 3 guns and bullets in a shoebox.
How do you feel?
That has to be the most horrific experience that a human could ever have.
David, would you give any advice?
First thing you do is not keep your ammunition with your weapons, and that your weapons need to be locked at all times.
Okay, so focusing again on this creative spark that was initiated by Latimer's parents, that was through line through his own life, through his daughter's life, or his daughter's life. This room really, again, is able to explore just how kind of passionate the entire family was, and kind of how they were able to see the world, make sense of the world, and really make those tangible things. So one of the new interactives of the museum, there are 4 in total, is this poetry machine, which was designed by the Kudos company. It kind of evokes a sense of invention and tinkering, kind of steampunk, where you're able to crank this wheel right here and actually hear Lewis Latimer's poetry being read by some of the writers of our exhibition design. Again, Latimer is talking about a lot of things in his life where he's ruminating on his love for his family, the love that he has for his wife, but also kind of what community means to him, what it means to leave behind a legacy, what it means to connect with other people. All of that is kind of in the words, in the stanzas, in the lines of his poetry. These are only 6 of his poems, so when you come, you can crank this wheel and hear his poetry being read. There are 6 that you can listen to here. There were 22 that were featured in a bound book for his 77th birthday, so you can also come and see that here. And then again, this room just, it really features, highlights the family and how the Latimers made a home for themselves, with some of photos from their home, their apartment in Manhattan. They were in Manhattan first and then in Brooklyn before moving here to Flushing, Queens. But you just get a sense of just a really joyous, loving family, whether it's Lewis and Mary themselves, this is for their 50th anniversary, or whether it's for their extended family in New England and on Long Island as well. We get to see his daughters, who again carried that spark. So Emma, Jeanette, and Rebecca, who are also, Louise Rebecca, who are also right here. Emma Jeanette became a concert pianist. So this is one of the pianos that she would practice on for Carnegie. She became a concert pianist, a composer, and she attended Juilliard before the school became Juilliard. And then Louise Rebecca was an artist, and she went to Pratt and designed covers for W. Du Bois. And she was kind of that connection between W. Du Bois and Lewis Latimer as well. So his daughters really carried on this creative legacy. And then, again, just being able to feature Latimer's words, his writings, how he saw the world. The walls are kind of covered in his patents, but also just him pulling from observation. So we have a few of his drawings. So this kind of really delicate, beautiful one of a vase of flowers, a portrait. This was drawn during a court case that he attended when he was working with Thomas Edison. And then we have a really beautiful portrait of one of his daughters as well. So you're able to see how, again, there were no boundaries between the arts and the sciences for Latimer. He pulled from a love of observation, a curiosity, and found ways to kind of practice those things all throughout his life as well.
We want to thank you again for tuning in to another exciting episode of Respections. And we want to extend our thanks to Adriana and Shane for hosting us. Very exciting presentation at Lewis Latimer House Museum. We look forward to bringing you the second episode, and we thank you for tuning in.